stop announcing and start executing. Real success don't make noise, it moves in silence. You don't need to broadcast every intention, every goal, every plan. That's not how champions operate. The ones who truly win, the ones who make a lasting impact, they're too focused on building to waste time on boasting. They understand that energy is either invested in action or wasted in attention seeking. When you're serious about your mission, you don't need to convince anyone of it. You prove it through your consistency, your effort, and your results. Talking is easy, it's comfortable, it gives the illusion of progress. But illusions don't build legacies, action does, grit does. Silence, when paired with movement, becomes one of the most powerful forces on the planet. Every time you open your mouth to tell someone what you're about to do, you give away a little power. You trade momentum for recognition, you swap discipline for distraction, and then when the motivation fades, when the crowd stops clapping, when it gets hard, and it always gets hard, you're left trying to explain why nothing happened. That's the danger of noise. It makes you feel like you're further than you are. It tricks your brain into thinking talking about it is the same as doing it. But it's not. It never will be. There's a reason why the greatest builders in history worked in silence first and spoke with results later. There's a reason why the most feared warriors never roared before battle. They simply showed up and dominated. You've got to stop putting pressure on yourself to perform for other people. That's not where growth happens. Growth doesn't need an audience. It needs focus. It needs late nights. It needs mornings where you get up before the world does. It needs sacrifices no one claps for. That's the grind, and that grind isn't glamorous. It's not pretty, it's not tweetable or flashy, it's sweaty, it's painful, it's repetitive, but it's real. And when you choose to embrace that quiet, unshakable discipline over the temptation to be seen, that's when the breakthrough begins. That's when your future starts to take shape. Not on a stage, but in the dark. Not under the spotlight, but in the shadows. Not in applause, but in the pressure of private commitment. You have to get to a place where your identity is rooted in execution, not in expression. Where your worth isn't based on recognition, but on resolve. Where you don't need to tell people you're coming. They see it in the way you walk, the way you prepare, the way you rise, the way you never stop. Real success doesn't need an announcement. It becomes its own announcement, and the only way to earn that kind of presence is through silent, consistent, relentless action, day after day, without needing to be seen, without needing to be praised, without needing someone to validate your effort. There's a reason you feel that fire inside when you move in silence. It's because that fire isn't dependent on outside fuel. It's yours, it's authentic, it doesn't need likes or shares or claps to keep burning. It feeds on hunger, on discipline, on vision. When you start living like that, you stop chasing moments. You start creating momentum. You stop talking about becoming something. You start becoming it, and suddenly the silence isn't empty. It's full of purpose, full of grind, full of becoming everything they never saw coming. Let your success be the noise. Let your consistency be the proof. Let your silence be the most powerful sound in the room. Your grind should be louder than your excuses. Talk less, work more. Excuses are cheap. They're always available, always convenient, always ready to pull you back into comfort. They whisper in your ear every time the journey gets hard, every time you feel tired, every time the progress seems slow. But the grind, oh, the grind tells a different story. The grind doesn't speak in words, it speaks in results. It doesn't make promises, it delivers outcomes. And when you're locked in, when you're truly committed to leveling up, you stop negotiating with excuses and start communicating through effort. You don't have to tell people what you're doing because your results will speak so loud that explanations become unnecessary. The truth is, most people never reach their full potential because they allow their excuses to talk them out of the fight. They allow discomfort to dictate their destiny. They believe the voice that says it's too hard, you're too tired, or it's not your time yet. But winners, the real grinders, they hear that same voice and they show up anyway. They choose progress over pity. They choose discipline over distraction. They understand that excuses might give temporary comfort, but the grind delivers permanent transformation. You've got to choose one. You can't have both. Either your excuses are in charge, or your work ethic is. When you let your actions do the talking, you take back the power. You stop wasting time explaining why you can't, and start proving why you will. You stop making speeches and start making moves, because at the end of the day, nobody cares what you were about to do, they care what you did. Nobody remembers the plan that never got executed. They remember the result that changed the game. And that only happens when you make the grind louder than the noise in your head. Louder than the doubt, louder than the criticism, louder than the fear. That's where growth happens. That's where confidence is built. Not in convenience, but in the decision to show up regardless of how you feel. Consistency is the language of the grind. It doesn't care about mood swings. It doesn't care about circumstances. It only knows one thing: show up. And if you want to be great, if you want to rise, if you want to separate yourself from the average, you've got to live in that mindset. You've got to train yourself to lean into the work, especially when it's hard. You've got to flip the script and turn "I don't feel like it" into "that's exactly why I need to." You don't wait until conditions are perfect, because they never will be. You don't wait for motivation to strike, because it fades. You show up because your purpose demands it, because your vision is too big for excuses and too important to put on pause. Every excuse you give power to is a brick you remove from the foundation of your future. Every time you choose to grind instead of fold, you stack another brick. You build, you rise, you evolve, and one day, that grind will pay off so loud, it'll echo beyond the people who doubted you, beyond the limits you once believed in. But that starts now. It starts in the quiet decisions, in the early mornings, in the late nights, in the choice to be faithful to your process when no one's watching. You don't need to convince anybody. You don't need a motivational speech every time it gets hard. You just need to remember why you started, and let that be louder than any excuse trying to slow you down. You came too far to let weakness win. You didn't survive everything you've been through just to be silenced by a lazy voice in your head. You've got work to do. You've got something to build. And if you do it right, your results will be louder than anything you could ever say. Discipline starts when your mouth closes and your actions speak. There comes a moment when you realize that talking about change won't bring change, that speaking about growth won't produce growth, that saying you want it doesn't mean you're willing to do what it takes to get it. That moment is where discipline is born. It's in that quiet, lonely space where you stop making declarations and start making decisions, where you stop waiting for motivation and start mastering movement. Because motivation may come and go, but discipline stays. Discipline wakes you up when you don't want to rise. It drags you to the grind when comfort begs you to stay. It doesn't care how you feel. It only cares what you do when you finally shut your mouth and start moving. Something shifts inside of you. You stop relying on external approval and start relying on internal power. You begin to understand that growth isn't glamorous. It's not loud. It's not surrounded by applause. It's repetitive. It's hard. It's thankless. But it's also where greatness is built. Discipline doesn't live on a stage. It lives in the small, consistent choices that nobody sees. In the hours where nobody is watching, where there's no spotlight, no reward, just you and your willpower. That's where the real work begins. That's where habits are formed. That's where futures are shaped. The people who reach the highest levels of success are not the ones with the best ideas, the loudest voices, or the biggest dreams. They are the ones who execute with relentless consistency. They're the ones who don't need to tell everyone what they're doing because their results eventually speak so loudly that no introduction is necessary. They don't perform for the crowd. They perform for their vision. They don't chase hype. They chase excellence, And they know that every time they choose discipline over delay, action over excuse, focus over comfort, they're stepping 1 inch closer to the life they were built for. You've got to train yourself to rise above emotion, to stay the course when everything in you screams for a break, to keep moving forward when progress feels invisible, because discipline isn't about doing big things once. It's about doing the small things daily. It's about showing up even when it's boring, even when it's painful, even when nobody claps for you, especially when nobody claps for you. That's when you learn who you really are. That's when your character is tested and refined. That's when you stop being a talker and start becoming a finisher. The world doesn't need another voice promising to change. It needs more examples of people who decided to change and backed it up with action. It needs less noise and more results. It needs less dreaming and more doing, and that starts with closing your mouth, silencing the excuses, and choosing discipline, not once, not twice, but every single day. It's not a sprint. It's a lifestyle, a rhythm, a mindset that says, no matter what, I keep showing up. That kind of commitment doesn't need to be broadcasted. It doesn't beg for attention. It just delivers. Quietly, powerfully, relentlessly. The truth is, your future doesn't need more words. It needs more work. Your goals don't need more hype. They need more hustle. Your destiny isn't waiting for your next speech, it's waiting for your next move. Every second you spend explaining your intentions could be spent executing them. Every moment you waste trying to sound committed could be used to prove that you are. Discipline is built in silence and revealed in results. It doesn't shout, it doesn't boast, it just keeps showing up until there's no room for doubt, until the evidence is too strong to ignore, until the grind becomes undeniable and the talk becomes unnecessary. Silence the inner critic. Your future doesn't need commentary, it needs commitment. That voice inside your head, the one always ready to doubt you, always quick to point out your flaws, always eager to remind you of every mistake you've ever made. That voice is not truth, it's resistance. It's the internal enemy disguised as logic. It's the part of you that's afraid to fail, afraid to grow, afraid to be exposed. And if you let that voice control the volume, it will rob you of everything you were born to become. You don't need a critic living rent, free in your mind when you're trying to build something powerful. You need courage. You need commitment. You need the kind of mindset that looks fear in the face and keeps moving forward anyway. The inner critic always shows up when you're trying to rise. It gets louder when you start to make progress, when you step out of your comfort zone, when you try something new, something bold, something real, and it doesn't attack your plan, it attacks your worth. It says you're not ready, you're not good enough, you're not as talented as them. It brings up your past to bury your future, but here's the truth, that critic doesn't know what you're capable of because it's stuck in who you used to be. You've got to learn to shut it down, not with arguments, not with debate, but with action. With consistent, undeniable effort that proves it wrong every single day, your future is calling. But you keep putting it on hold because you're too busy explaining yourself to a voice that doesn't deserve your attention. You're delaying your progress by entertaining doubts that should have been left behind. You weren't built to live in hesitation. You were built to move forward, and that starts by no longer asking the inner critic for permission. You don't need commentary on your every move. You need conviction in your mission. You don't need opinions. You need ownership. Own your story. Own your growth. Own your setbacks and your bounce backs. Because as long as you're giving energy to the critic, you're taking energy away from the climb. Most people don't fail because of external resistance. They fail because of internal interference. They lose to the story they keep repeating in their head. They've been told they're not enough, and eventually they started believing it. But the only way to flip that story is to write a new one through action, through consistency, through refusing to let that voice win. Because the more you show up, the quieter it becomes. The more you execute, the less power it holds. The more you move forward, the more irrelevant it sounds. And one day, it becomes background noise while your life becomes a loud, undeniable example of perseverance. You weren't designed to listen to a voice that holds you back. You were designed to speak with your feet, your focus, your faith. The inner critic can't survive a person who keeps showing up. It can't handle someone who's more committed to purpose than to perfection. That critic feeds off hesitation, off procrastination, off silence. But when you start taking steps, even shaky ones, it starts to lose its grip. When you stop needing perfect conditions and start working with what you have, that voice has less room to grow. When you keep showing up, regardless of fear, regardless of doubt, you start to realize that the critic never had the power. You just kept giving it the mic. Your future isn't waiting for you to feel ready. It's waiting for you to get started, to stop asking for permission and start owning your space, to stop thinking about what could go wrong and start focusing on what could go right. Your next level isn't going to come from self-doubt, it's going to come from self-discipline. It's going to come from shutting down the commentary and choosing to keep climbing, keep building, keep becoming. That inner critic doesn't get a say in where you're going. It's your commitment that will decide that. Let your actions be the answer. Let your resilience be the rebuttal. Let your future speak so loudly that the critic becomes nothing but a faint echo behind your roar. You don't need validation, you need elevation. Let results do the talking. The problem is too many people are addicted to approval. They want to be noticed before they've even earned it. They want applause before they've done anything worth clapping for. They chase recognition like it's fuel, thinking if enough people cheer them on, then maybe they'll find the strength to keep going. But real strength doesn't come from the outside. It's built internally. It comes from the quiet hours when you're grinding with no spotlight. It comes from the lonely moments when you choose to keep moving even when nobody sees it. Validation is external and temporary. Elevation is internal and permanent. You don't rise by being seen. You rise by being consistent. You don't have to post every time you're working. You don't have to tell everyone about your next move. You don't need to advertise your ambition. You need to execute. Because the world doesn't need another voice saying, "I'm about to do something great." It needs more people actually doing it. It needs more people building in silence, committed to growth whether it's celebrated or not. The real ones aren't moved by claps. They're moved by calling. They don't need to be seen. They need to be better. They're not searching for followers. They're searching for discipline, for clarity, for purpose. The ones who truly elevate are the ones who learn to stand alone if they have to, because they've realized their destiny doesn't depend on a fan club. The problem with seeking validation is that it makes you dependent. It puts your identity in someone else's hands. When they cheer, you rise. When they're silent, you shrink. But elevation doesn't work like that. It's built when you show up for yourself, day after day, whether or not anyone claps. It's built when you put in the work behind the scenes and let your results introduce you later. You don't need to prove anything with words. Prove it with progress. Prove it with execution. Prove it by becoming so undeniable that people have no choice but to pay attention. Elevation comes from patience. From doing the work over and over again with no reward, no recognition, just raw belief that what you're building is worth it. The ones who get to the top didn't get there by asking for attention. They got there by mastering repetition, by understanding that greatness is the result of thousands of quiet moments stacked on top of each other with no instant gratification. You won't find elevation on the stage. You'll find it in the process, in the discipline, in the consistency, in the relentless pursuit of better. When nobody's clapping for you, you've got to stop waiting for someone to see your worth and start building a life that reflects it. You've got to stop needing confirmation and start cultivating conviction. Because when you truly believe in what you're doing, you don't need approval, you don't need permission, you don't need a crowd. You just need vision and the will to pursue it every single day. The results you build in silence will scream louder than anything you could ever say. The growth you achieve in private will shine so bright, nobody will even remember that you weren't validated on the way up. The respect you earn through effort will outlast the applause you once begged for. There's a different kind of power that comes when you stop needing to be seen and start demanding more of yourself. When you stop chasing validation and start chasing mastery. When you stop waiting for opportunity and start creating it. Your focus shifts from how you look to how you live, from impressing others to improving yourself. And when that shift happens, that's when elevation begins. That's when your grind starts to rise above the noise. That's when your name begins to carry weight. Not because you talked about what you were going to do, but because you did it, over and over again, with excellence, with humility, with focus. Let the results speak for you. Let the work shine through. Let the elevation be the proof that you never needed validation to begin with. Winners don't broadcast their hustle, they prove it daily through consistency. In a world obsessed with noise, where everyone wants to be seen, the real ones are out there working while the rest are talking. It's easy to post a highlight reel. It's easy to announce your goals, wear ambition like a badge, and talk about how hungry you are. But hunger doesn't live in words. Hunger shows up in routine. Hunger lives in discipline. The people who actually win don't need to say they're grinding. You can see it in how they move, how they show up, how they refuse to take a day off from their mission. Because for them, this isn't just a goal, it's a lifestyle. Talk fades, hype dies, but consistency builds legacy. That's what separates the dreamers from the doers. Anyone can be motivated for a moment. Anyone can grind for a week. But can you show up when it's boring? Can you execute when it's not fun? Can you keep going when no one's clapping for you? That's where winners are made. The days that look like nothing's changing, but they keep moving anyway. That's where elevation happens. In silence, in the grind, in the repeated choice to show up again and again when it would be easier to quit. Winners don't need an audience. They need a plan, a vision, and relentless focus. Some people are too busy trying to impress that they forget to progress. They want to look successful more than they want to be successful. They're addicted to optics, addicted to recognition. But the winners, they're addicted to growth. They wake up with something to prove, not to the world, but to themselves. They don't just want results. They're willing to do what's required to earn them. While others are broadcasting, they're building. While others are talking about hustle, they're already halfway through their second workout, their third draft, their fourth rejection that day. But they keep showing up. That's what champions do. They don't perform for claps. They move for purpose. If you've got time to keep explaining your hustle, maybe you're not hustling enough. If you need to convince people you're grinding, maybe you're not grinding hard enough. Because when you're truly locked in, the results will speak so loudly, you won't have to say a word. You'll walk in rooms and your presence will say it all. Your work ethic will echo before you even open your mouth. Consistency builds reputation. Repetition builds respect. There's no fast track, no shortcut, no hack around the process. It's you versus you every single day. And if you can win that battle, if you can conquer yourself, nobody can stop you. The ones who win are the ones who didn't need motivation every morning. They built systems that carried them even on the days they didn't feel like it. They didn't care if anyone was watching. They knew the real work happens when the cameras are off. They understood that greatness doesn't announce itself. It emerges after hours and hours of focused, disciplined effort. The best in the world, they don't talk about being the best. They just put in the work over and over until it's undeniable, until their excellence is no longer a goal. It's just who they are. You don't need to scream about your hustle. Let it whisper through your daily routine. Let it breathe through your habits. Let it rise in your actions. Real hustlers don't flash. They last. They outwork the noise. They outlast the hype. They stay consistent long enough to turn small efforts into massive wins. And while the rest of the world is still talking about what they're going to do, The real ones are already doing it, quietly, consistently, relentlessly, because they know the hustle isn't something you advertise. It's something you live every day, every rep, every step, and that's how you win, not once, but again and again, with no announcement necessary.